It's another edition of Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James. I'm here with Katy Hogan, and we're glad to be here again. We've got a good show lined up. We're going to talk labor history with Mike Goldfield up in the Northwest. We're going to talk with a couple of musicians from Italy and Chicago, and we're going to remember our good friend Mimi Harris. So all you friends, you neighbors, you comrades, wherever you may be, stay tuned for an hour of real interesting conversation and a good time. And once again, thank you, Keb Mo. We do stand up and be strong here in Chicago. So let's let it roll. Good morning to you, Katy Hogan.
Good morning, Michael James. I know this is the time for good things, and I will mention just one before we talk about the doctors in Canada. I just had a wonderful week with Brandy Carlisle in Cancun, singing and incredible live music, incredible vibes, and all, not totally, but mostly girls thing. I love being in a girls' presence, and 5,000 of them at a sunny resort in Mexico is an excellent way to splash around in the pool and meet a lot of really great gals. And I'm thinking of you all, especially all the incredible musicians.
Well, it was really good to have you make a little cameo appearance from the beach down there last week on the show.
I couldn't believe that happened.
It lightened up the whole deal, and you showed us that little coaster that floated around in the pool.
Yes.
Well, let's get to some serious stuff.
First, this really good thing, right? That doctors in Canada can now prescribe visits to national parks, allowing those with prescriptions to enter without, free of charge, without paying their fee, in recognition that walking in nature is healing. Yes.
I like it. And I do have a pass to go to all the national parks here.
Me too.
I got to start using it.
Yeah, right.
Okay, around the globe, the Olympics are dominating the news, at least some of it, and there's always controversy about China's human rights policy. 6 young Japanese people are suing the operator of the Fukushima nuclear plant after developing thyroid cancer in the years following the 2011 disaster. And we still await with bated breath what is going on in the Ukraine with Russia, Belarus, etc. We'll see.
Yeah, it's very tense.
What do you got on Mitch McConnell, Katy?
Well, amazingly, Mitch McConnell finally reached a point where he was upset with fellow Republicans. Congratulations. Welcome to the party, Mitch. He's criticizing the RNC for the language that they used and for censuring the 2 House Republicans who are on the committee to investigate the January 6th rioting. And he said it's not the party's job to police the views of lawmakers. Not sure what that meant, but what he finally and truly objected to were the words that the investigation represented the persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. Okay, that's dangerous, folks. If that becomes what looks like legitimate political discourse, we're in big trouble. So those words, of course, drew outrage from everybody, Democratic, and even a few GOP senators who I have brain cells working. I'd like to know their names and congratulate them. But this committee's work is extremely important, continues to be extremely important. And every time they criticize what's his name? Cheney's daughter. I like her more.
Liz Cheney.
She's pretty strong.
Up in Minnesota, the Amir Locke murder at the hands of the Minneapolis police has sparked protests as the dust from the George Floyd murder has only begun to settle. The officers used a no-knock warrant in the early hours of the morning and shot the 22-year-old Amir Locke dead. He was not listed as a suspect in the warrant. So the mayor ended all no-knock warrants. And, that's an issue that we're dealing with in Chicago and around the country. So let's hope that there's some semblance of justice in some way for this young fellow who got killed, and that these policies that get enacted too often are abolished.
Yep. What about Supreme Court? Supreme Court did something good.
They did. No, I don't know if they did or not. No, the Supreme Court, you may know of something good.
Right.
What I saw was that they rejected the Alabama federal court's decision to have Alabama change the legislative districts that were drawn to favor Republicans. And the reason that the 5-4 decision by the conservative majority, lacking Roberts, who went with the liberals, was because it was too close to the date of the election. I don't know what
you mean too close to the November election?
Yeah, or what maybe the primary. I'm not sure, but I
wonder.
There was not a lot of, in the news. It was basically they just decided against, a better situation for Black voters who are over 25% of the population in Alabama and are limited to one district.
We need to do a little house cleaning on the voter suppression and voter protection stuff that we normally do reporting on, because as the primaries draw near, there was another decision, and I'm not even sure where, so I'm not going to talk about it, about Ohio district redistricting. There was a court decision this week, so we'll catch up on that. And
that was in Ohio, though, Ohio court.
Right.
And there's also a decision in North Carolina, I think. So I don't know what effect this thing that the Supreme Court just did will have on those other states.
I don't either.
And on the reefer report, we've been talking a lot about Oklahoma and how, pot is being grown there like more than many places. People are moving their farms from California to Oklahoma, and it hit the national news this week. But you have something else on another so-called drug.
Well, I just got this from our dude, Emilio, who founded somewhere. A group of Maryland senators recently filed a bill that would create a state fund that could be used to provide free access to psychotropics, for military veterans suffering from PTSD, who, while also supporting their research into their therapeutic potential. We have reported on therapeutic potential of psychotropics before, and I'm really happy to see this happening. As a former indulger, I felt it helped my mental health greatly. And okay, what's happening with COVID, Michael?
Well, there's this trucker blockade up there in Canada, and it's some Canadian truckers, but it's some American truckers, and a lot of support coming from right-wing American groups. Their GoFundMe page was canceled, but then the Christian groups moved in on it. There's talk about trucks blocking other border crossings from the U.S. side. So that's one thing that's going on over masks and mandate. No, it's over vaccination. Here in Illinois, Pritzker says indoor mask mandate ends at the end of February. There's obviously a lot of Democratic governors have moved to end these mandates. Probably it's connected to upcoming elections and politics as much as the lessening of the threat. Our labor report is really going to come up with our guest, Mike Goldfield, but let's just tell everybody that Starbucks employees continue to organize, and congressional staffers now have launched an effort to unionize their workplace, and we'll hear more about that.
Let's ask Michael about that when he comes out, if he knows.
Yeah, we'll see. And in Chicago, the Chicago Gig Alliance is urging support for the rideshare living wage ordinance, which will protect not only driver safety, but also protect the level of prices being charged for the consumer, the people riding in the back seat of those Uber cars and those Lyft cars. So we'll follow that because that's a good one. And, anytime people are organizing, we're really happy about that.
I guess, and just lastly, before we bring in our first guest, and we have 3 guests today, so bear with us, folks. They're all interesting. Here in Rogers Park, we are mourning and marking the passing of one of our own, Steve Canine, a man who's opened up a great little joint on the corner of Newgard and Devon back in, I'm thinking 72, 73, called Canine's. It is still a great bar. He did the thing that a community most appreciates. He created a safe, fun, lively place on a corner and invited the world in, and also ran it the way he wanted to. Steve was no pushover, as anybody who knew him could tell you. He had his rules, but he also had, in this tiny place, a big old pool table. And when COVID hit, they found a little back patio that they could use and serve on for a while. I just want to say I love Steve Canine. He was a wonderful guy. And we used to run into each other at the bank when we would be dropping off yesterday's receipts, me from the Heartland, him from Canine's. Anyway, peace in your transition, brother Steve. You were a real doll.
You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show. It's broadcast on Saturday mornings and streamed on Saturday mornings on WLUW 88.7, WLUW.org. We're going to return with our first guest in just a minute. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland show. We're out of Chicago, but now we're going to head up to the Seattle area. Going to talk with an old pal. Haven't seen him in 100 years almost. That would be Mike Goldfield, the retired labor professor from Wayne State, who worked in the Newark Community Union Project way back in the 60s. Good morning to you, Mike. How goes up there in the north?
Good morning. No, things are great. The temperature is mild. People are shivering and it's 48 degrees. So I just came from Detroit where it's a little colder.
Yeah, it's a little chilly here too. We're more than shivering. We're staying inside.
Right.
So how long were you in Detroit? You were teaching at Wayne State.
Yeah, I was there for 30 years. So I got kicked out of school at the University of Chicago. I was a Teamster for a year. I spent 9 years working for International Harvester, trying to raise as much hell as I could. And then we went back to school, and we were in Cornell for 8 years. And in 92, I came to Detroit. So 30 years I spent in Detroit, and I just retired from Wayne State.
Good for you.
Let's jump right in. In the current period, let's say right now, and over the past year, we've seen a large upsurge in union organizing and strikes, more than we've seen in a long, long time. We've got workers at Amazon going at it. They were down in Bessemer, Alabama, and which you've written about, and I'm sure you will talk about. We've got Starbucks, we've got teachers, we got workers in auto plants, coal miners in Alabama. There's a lot going on. How about giving us a little bit of information of what you see going on and what it means?
Okay, so I think this period is interesting, and it's different than in certain ways than other periods of labor upsurge. It also has some similarity. So in general, in the past, like in the 1930s or in the 1960s with public sector union organizing, there were certain big strikes that galvanized people. So in 1933, the coal miners across the country organized in 6 weeks, and they pretty much inspired other people. Teachers organized early in 1960, particularly 50,000 New York City teachers struck. And that was sort of a signal for everybody else. This period is unusual in that we haven't had any massive strike or union victory, but it seems to be taking place across the board in big places, little places. I keep track of a lot of these things, and the list, some of the things have been publicized. The Frito-Lay workers strike has been publicized. John Deere, which is close at hand to Chicago, workers struck, but in Kentucky, water workers are on strike. It seems to be taking place, whether it's a Republican state, a Democratic state. Here in Seattle, concrete workers are on strike. And the list really goes on and on. There's really no rhyme or reason to the strike. The main thing seem to be that workers who've been underpaid, working and pressed too hard, have been really concerned, the lack of safety conditions, particularly during the pandemic. And with the labor market being tight and employers having trouble hiring all the people they want, workers have a lot of leverage. So workers gain leverage in different types of ways. One is when the labor market is tight. Other groups of workers, skilled workers of certain types, which includes professional athletes, have leverage because their skills aren't easily replaceable. And other workers are in industries where if they strike, they cause lots of damage. So this strike wave is taking place, I mean, all over the world in some ways, but certainly all over North America. I think one of the particularly inspiring things is the biggest GM plant, General Motors plant in Mexico, where General Motors and other auto companies hire workers to do the same thing as are done in the US, but as a fraction of the cost. So workers in the biggest GM plant in Mexico, over 6,000 workers, rejected the traditional company union connected to the PRI, the Party of Revolution from over 100 years ago, which has become very anti-worker. They voted almost 90% in favor of an independent union, and they're now raising demands to get more than the $8 or $10 a day, which they get. And they have a lot of leverage. GM needs their production. So I think this period is unusual in terms of the spread. Part of it has to do with the pandemic. Part of it has to do with other things going on. But go ahead. I mean, I have more to say, but why don't you proceed with other types of questions?
Well, you brought up the history of the 30s, and I'm just wondering, how we can compare, or if we can compare even what's going on now to the organizing of industrial workers in the 30s, or to the organizing of the public sector workers in the 60s and 70s. You spoke a little bit to that, but is there anything notably down a different path on this organizing that's currently going on?
So I think in general, what happens, my belief is that workers under capitalism always need and mostly want unions, and they're kept from having them. Coal miners clearly needed unions during the 20s, but they were brutally smashed and whatnot. And it wasn't until the early 1930s that they really started organizing. And I think that's the same. So in all these periods, workers have had repressed needs that finally got broken through. So that's a similar thing. But in some ways, the critical sector. So it's nice to see Starbucks workers organizing. Right. For those of us who go into these coffee shops, these people seem like they're working at high speed. They have a lot of complaints that we don't see in terms of pressure and harassment and shifts, irregular shifts and that sort of thing. But they're not in a position, even if they all organize, to dramatically affect the economy. On the other hand, workers at Amazon have a lot more leverage. So Amazon is unusual. So Walmart was the first big commercial sales chain to go this high speed delivery and to make things very efficient. But 90% of their workers work in big box stores, 200 employees, 300 at most. They don't have a lot of leverage compared to Starbucks workers. Starbucks employs, and who knows, it changes every day, but somewhere around 1 million workers in the United States, but 80 to 90% of them are in these big warehouse and delivery stations. The biggest ones, like the one in Bessemer, Alabama, have 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 workers in them. And if these workers organize and successfully strike, then they can shut down significant parts of Amazon's operation. They also can create a lot of havoc for the economy. So most of us at this time depend upon a lot of these deliveries, both for consumer goods. Many of us, particularly some of us who are older, are concerned about shopping and have more delivery. I never would have thought of having food delivered.
I know.
Either from a restaurant or a grocery store before the pandemic.
Or a snack late at night.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe a pizza delivery, but aside from that, it wasn't anything on the horizon. And now it's become a much more central part of the economy.
Yeah.
But the other thing I think that's peculiar about this period is that while workers' pay has only increased marginally and conditions are thought of as bad, these companies have made record profits during the pandemic. So Amazon, but even John Deere locally, I mean, not but in Chicago, but we go down to East Moline and places where they have their big plants.
Close enough to be local for us.
What?
Close enough to be local for us.
Right. So John Deere has made huge profits during the past year and a half, yet they offer their workers 3%, 4%, 5% wage increases. They don't check the speed up at all in the plants, and yet they're doubling and tripling their profits over a very short period of time. And I think that in addition to the leverage that workers have, the resentments, we have Jeff Bezos with a $500 million yacht, which doesn't have space for a heliport. So he builds a second yacht to drag behind so his girlfriend, who's a pilot, can land her helicopter there. This somehow doesn't resonate if you're barely scraping by and having to come into work when the company isn't providing any safety conditions or whatnot. So I think that, and the important thing to recognize is this is taking place all over the country. I mean, so there's nothing cultural about what's going on. So when you talk about the South, which is the place that I've spent the most time studying, particularly labor there, people say, oh, Southern workers are this, there's a culture of submissiveness or individuality or this or that. All these places in the South, workers face bad conditions, they're organizing, they're striking. And that also took place, as I try to document in my most recent book on the South, The Southern Key, which I sent a flyer to you, maybe you can circulate. This took place in the 1930s and 1940s. And Alabama, although we think of it with George Wallace and this right-wing racist stuff going on, Alabama was a very liberal state for 10, 15 years. And the reason for that is that 26%, in 1945, 26% of the workers in the state were unionized. And to put that in perspective, there's no state in the United States that's over 25% unionized at present. And even places like Illinois and Michigan, which we considered historically high unionized places, are under 20%. So Alabama, led by coal miners, forced the election of officials and forced the government to do a lot of quote unquote, progressive things.
Mike, let me jump in and ask you, what should we keep our eye on? What's a bellwether of what's to come, of what we're seeing going on now?
So I think that the amount of strikes and organizing are not yet, even though they're very widespread, are not yet comparable to what we saw with public sector workers in the 60s and 70s or anything going on in the 30s. And I think that the things to keep an eye on are the industries and places where workers have lots of leverage. So that includes what's called the logistic chain delivery. It's not just warehouses and Amazon, it's truckers, it's longshoremen, the ports are clogged up. It's basic manufacturing, which is still much more important in the country than people argue. So, for example, with the exception of Mexico, which is very close by, almost all the foreign auto workers have moved their assembly plants and much of their part production to the US, and many of that's in the South. So 25 to 30% of auto production in this country is done by what are called transplants. So that's Toyota, Honda, et cetera, et cetera. The 4 or 5 Japanese auto manufacturers are the biggest. So they do that because this is a prime market for them. And there's a lot of, it used to be in the 80s that they'd import cars, but that's too much of a hassle. There are tariffs and all that. So the production in this country, we need to look at heavy manufacturing, oil production workers, logistic workers. It seems to me when these workers organize massively, it'll stimulate much greater organizing among workers with less leverage. And that's historically what happened, not just in the 30s, in the country as a whole. It happened, a lot has been written about Hormel workers in Austin, Minnesota. They organized the main plant there, and then they went to organize what's called wall to wall. So beauty parlor people organized, newspaper delivery people organized, everybody else. So I think that those big places that organize and strike, if they're successful, will stimulate a much bigger wave. And in Chicago, in the Chicago area, you still have manufacturing, although nobody writes about it. And I'm also struck that even on the left, people pay very little attention to labor. So for all the good things that the 1619 Project has done, for example, there's nothing about Black labor in the book or in what people say, which is sort of peculiar since almost all the famous early Black historians concentrated on looking at the labor movement, I mean, including W.E.B. Du Bois. So I think that we look for this organizing to take place. Amazon's going to be a tough nut because of the resources that they bring. I would compare it to steel, to the problems that steel workers faced in the Chicago, Indiana area, where there were over 100,000 steel workers in the 1930s. The companies had so much resources and were so repressive that steel workers took a lot longer to organize than coal miners or clothing and workers and that sort of thing. When they finally organized, there was a huge explosion, and these big locals, at one point, South Works, Gary Works, these bigger places had 30,000 or more workers working at them. So when they finally broke through, there was a massive spreading out of organizing and strikes.
I want to just, in the light of, you mentioned, truckers being an obvious, logistically strong unit of workers to organize. We have a political problem there, though. We have, given what's going on the border between Canada and US right now, we have the truckers making the most noise are pretty right wing. They're turning mask wearing into a political statement. They're turning scientific reasons for closing borders. I think it is challengeable, but it's being done in such a way that's pretty unfriendly, shall I say? And just couple that with the inflation that everyone is experiencing now, whether or not they got a raise in pay or any pay whatsoever. Prices have risen to 7%, I think I heard yesterday, of most goods. So I'm not sure what the era allows us to do and how we can support the new wave of organizing, to assist it.
Yeah, so clearly the present situation is complicated in a lot of ways, but I think that the cachet and the publicity go to people like these truckers. So if you look at the data in Canada, over 90% of truckers in Canada are fully vaccinated.
Right.
Let's assume that if you're fully vaccinated, you're not on the picket line around it in Michigan, the two biggest bridges to Canada. And by far the biggest one is the Ambassador Bridge from Detroit to Windsor. So who are these people? They're being handled with kid gloves. You can remember, certainly Michael can, if we had a demonstration in Chicago and the '68 convention, we were beaten by clubs and people were killed at these things and whatnot. And these people were being handled with kid gloves. There's a lot going on, and certainly the ascendancy and the leverage in terms of publicity are not on the left at this point. The Black Lives Matter stuff, as extraordinarily impressive it was, dissipated as a public phenomenon in the months afterwards fairly quickly. Michael, I was in '67 with tens of thousands of us sitting in and spent overnight surrounding the Pentagon, and we were all worried with all the troops there that we were going to be shot. And you look at what happened last year on January 9th, if that had been us and we had actually broken through into one of those buildings, many of us would be laying on the street.
Mike.
So it's there's lots of things going on, clearly.
Thank you for giving us so much information, and we're going to digest it. Tell people briefly how they could get your latest book or how they get a hold of you, and we'll have you back in the not too far off with more labor reporting.
Yeah, so that sounds good. So my book is going to come out in paper, they claim, but the publisher's slow on these things. But the flyer I sent you has a discount coupon for 30% off. It's called The Southern Key: Class, Race, and Radicalism in the 1930s and 1940s. It's available from Oxford University Press. You asked me about the background. That this is actually on the cover of an earlier book I did called The Color of Politics, Race in the Mainstream of American Politics. And it's basically about race and labor from the beginning of colonial times to the present. I'm available on Facebook. I have a website at Wayne State. People want to get in contact. What?
We found you one time, we'll find you again. You did great, and I really appreciate it. And we keep talking longer, but we got a whole bunch of other guests coming on.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And Mike, I haven't seen you in a long time. So
next time.
Thank you, Mike Goldfield. Thank you so much for joining us and for your lifetime of good work.
Thank you.
Right. So we just heard from a song that you guys made. I'm not sure which one.
Okay.
Because we didn't, it's either Painted Lady or what was the other one, Freddie?
Woman. Yeah.
Painted Woman. Sorry.
Yes.
Painted Woman, or
It's the same thing.
there was another one.
Well, Lynn is the person who hooked us up with you guys, and she sent us 8 tunes. And
Okay.
we're not sure which is which, but we'll work that out when this thing gets presented. Not only for the radio on Saturday morning and the streaming, but forever on youtube.com/Heartland Media. So
All right.
we're ready to welcome the two of you in. Our guests now are Freddie McGuire over in Florence, Italy, and Larry Williams right here in Chicago.
Right here.
The occasion for all of this is because they have a new album out, Freddie's album. It's called Evidence. It's got a bunch of tunes on it. And Freddie is coming to the States to appear at Buddy Guy's Legends on February 17th, and he's going to play with a wonderful band called the Larry Williams Band.
There you go.
Good morning to you two guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to Live from the Heartland. So listen, let me ask Larry. Larry, Freddie told us that you guys met each other on Facebook. How
Yes.
did that happen?
Yeah.
Please tell us how that happened.
Well, actually, I've done a lot of engagements out in the UK, and the videos that we posted were pretty good. They're pretty good, and Freddie got a hold to them, and he dug them, and he in return spoke with this beautiful young lady named Colleen, who's here in Chicago, who introduced me to Freddie through Facebook, and that's how the connection got started. And as an artist, you get a lot of phone calls from a lot of different people. So it wasn't that we were blowing anybody off or anything of that magnitude. It's just that things start rolling, and sometimes you don't get a chance to get to it. So I got a chance to listen to some of his material. I was like, wow, really? He said, yeah, and I got this, I got that. I said, wow. Then I got excited. Because the enterprise that we're dealing with, LD Enterprise, is that, we're doing a whole lot of different things, such as, PR work, EPKs, contracts, showing artists how to get everything going. And we have a record label on the table as well, which we're about to launch. We have not launched yet, but it's on the table. And I'm like, okay, well, he is a great artist. I like the way he sounds. Let's go. Let's run with it. Then I got excited. Then when I got excited, I'm like, look, I told my team, we got to jump on this guy. We got to jump on him. So that's where we're at now.
Freddie, what's your side of that story now? Fill in your side of that story.
Yes. We had a great connection, and Larry's an amazing musician, a great artist, and a very nice and sweet person. So I immediately thought that it would have been an honor for me to have an opportunity more to come back to Chicago and be introduced by a great artist like him. And my music can only be better if a musician like him plays it. I mean,
Nice.
it's amazing. He's amazing.
Very nice.
And we have the same taste. We both love Larry Graham and funk music, soul, rhythm and blues. We are both eclectic, so we like the same things, the same music styles, blues, rhythm and blues, funk music. So it's a big pleasure to me to play with Larry.
Have you been to Chicago before, Freddie?
I've been to Chicago once in October and November 2019.
All right.
Let me ask Freddie how he got interested in blues and rhythm and blues, soul, funk, living over in Italy. I know your dad is from Philadelphia, but an Irish guy. How did you develop your interest in music over there? And what is the scene like in Italy for funk, blues, rhythm and blues?
My American grandfather, he was from Philadelphia, and he could meet people like Bobby Timmons, Lee Morgan, Benny Golson, and many other musicians, blues and jazz musicians. So he owned a huge collection. So when I was a child, I used to listen to my grandfather and my grandfather's and my father's collection. So I fell in love with the Beatles, with Graham Central Station, Sly and the Family Stone, Tad Dameron, Howlin' Wolf, Jimi Hendrix, and many others.
So you were basically doing the same thing in Florence that we were all doing here in Chicago, listening to the same music and getting the same beat and the same good vibes. Let's ask Larry Williams. You've been around for a while, I assume, and Chicago is still your home.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you hope for from this big album you've made called Evidence? Is that right?
Evidence, yes.
Well, actually, we're looking at big things to come through it. As I indicated, I've been in the UK many times and ran across a lot of artists that are very, very good. And I think the connection between the US and the UK is perfect coming through music. And what the CD that Freddie has basically put together himself and pour all of his ideas in, and all, like I indicated, all we did was enhance what it is that he's already doing. And with that, I'm looking at real good, big, positive things happening and launching off everything that we're launching off here in Chicago with me and the whole team that we have. We're excited. We're very excited. And as I said, our way is to make sure that, everybody we deal with, gets their fair share of the music industry as everyone else, and we definitely think Freddie has a big part to play in that.
Are you two joined by other artists? I'm sure you're joined by other artists on the album Evidence. Anybody you want to mention?
Well, I really don't want to name drop right now.
Okay.
But I would like to say that it's an awesome CD, and not saying we're going to do any changes on it or anything of that nature, but like I said, it's still out there, and we want to make it as perfect and as good as possible. So when we do put it out there, we do start name dropping, we'll make sure that everybody is on the same page. And that's the whole thing about LD. We want to make sure every artist get his just due on everything that we do. When it comes to the singer, the drummer, even if you got a tambourine player, we want that person to have his just due as well as everyone else.
How did you put the album together? Did you just have, you just merged the tracks that were recorded in Italy and the tracks recorded here in the States, in Chicago?
I recorded, the in Italy, and then I called a few special guests. My Italian guitarist Sergio Montaleni. He has worked for over 20 years with Sugar Blue.
Yeah.
And a few Chicagoans, like my very good friend, Cross Charles Mack.
Who's that? Who's that?
He sang a song with me, Take My Blues Away.
Yeah.
What's the name?
And Cross Charles Mack.
Yeah, Charles Mack, he was actually the bass player for James Cotton when James Cotton was alive. And him and his brother Mark Mack, they were bass player drummer, which we all grew up together. I grew up with the Mack brothers, and they're outstanding musicians. So what Charles Mack laid down was awesome. It was totally awesome. And I love the track that he did. I love the music that was put together. As I indicated, Freddie primarily put everything set in the UK. And then it was something to me as I listened to it. And I was tweaking what needed to be tweaked as I told the other musicians here in Chicago. But at the same token, what he put together was outstanding.
Go ahead,
Larry, you're at Legends. Are you the house band at Legends?
No, but I am there a lot, right?
Okay.
No,
could be mistaken for it, right?
Yeah. No, well, I'm actually one of the artists that I'm grateful that folks call me in to play for them, and a lot of the gigs are at Legends or Kingston Mines, and one of my favorites, Blue Chicago, down on Clark Street. Those are, people call me in to play with them. So you can primarily catch me playing anywhere.
So how cool is it going to be to have Freddie in Chicago and drag him around to all these places?
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome.
And especially as I indicated, everything, like I said, when things started rolling, it just started snowballing, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was growing, and it's still going fast. I'm trying to catch the ball. So, but everything is working out real well. We have a spectacular team behind us. I have EPK team ready. I have contract team. I got studio. It's like a lot is really going on, and we're excited about it. And to introduce Freddie to a lot of these places is going to be awesome.
Okay,
what's the name of your label, Larry? What's the name of your label?
Well, the label that's on the table, because I don't want to false advertising because it's rolling now. It's called LD Records, okay? But it's also under LD Enterprise, which covers a wide range of musical talent, commercials, movies, and things of that magnitude. So we're trying to get in the whole ball of wax of things. If we can get some of Freddie's music on a movie, we want to do that. If we can get them on a mobile commercial, we'll do that. So whenever we're trying to do a lot of things with the artists in Chicago. So then, like I indicated before, the pie is so huge that everybody can get a slice of pie and be full for the rest of their lives.
Larry, excuse
Yes.
me, Freddie, let me ask you, are you going to sing all these songs in English or are you going to do some in Italian? Can you do the same song in both languages?
No, I've never sung in Italian before. Never, because English sounds better for me, especially
For blues.
yeah, especially for my music.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, tell us the date and the time and where it's going to happen.
Larry,
We're
there.
opening at Legends early, say about 7 or 8 o'clock that evening. And the first show will be at 9 o'clock. And we are planning on doing at least 2 shows that night. And we're looking forward to everybody being there, come on out and support, Freddie and the LD production. So if you come out, you're guaranteed to have a good time, and there's going to be a lot of good music being played, a lot of good entertainment, and definitely I'm going to give you some bass solos. So,
all right.
Well,
I thought you were going to send us out with a few bass notes, which would be fine.
I don't. You know what? I did think about that, but I don't.
That's okay. It's okay.
Up now. But I promise you, next time we do a Zoom meeting, I will definitely have the bass plugged up, ready to go.
All right, we'll see you guys next week on the 17th at Legends, February 17th, Legends, around 9 o'clock.
Exactly.
Hope to meet you both.
Thank you, Francesco from Florence, and thank you, Larry from South Side.
Yes.
We're up here on the North Side. I hope we see you guys later this month. I really would like to meet you in person.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having us and introducing this thing. I really appreciate you, and we love you guys so much. Thank you.
Back at you, babe. Back
All
at
right,
you.
Freddie, I'll see you soon.
So we are so happy to welcome our good friends, Mary Driscoll, Peter Kuttner, who we asked to come in this week for an extended in memoriam on our friend Mimi Merkles Harris. God love her, God bless her soul and her transition. And we want these guys to talk about what she meant to you and us all. Welcome back, you both. And let's just launch. Whoever wants to go first. Mary?
Yeah, okay, hurry up. So I just want to talk a little bit about a remembrance of Mimi. Mimi and I went to Spain together with our daughters, and we went to Barcelona. And also we were lucky enough, because we knew the great nephew of Luis Buñuel, to be able to stay in his house in a little town called Calafate. And it was so moving to go to Spain with Mimi because her husband, Sidney Harris, had fought in the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. And it was just wonderful to travel with Mimi. We had a lot of adventures. And the thing about Mimi, going anywhere with Mimi, you could be in Spain, you could be on a street corner in Chicago, is that she knew how to connect with people. And Mimi loved adventure, the kind of adventure that I call adventure of the soul, where being in Spain and in Barcelona was wonderful to be there with her, but I could have been anywhere with her and had those kind of adventures. She knew how to talk to people and get down to their essence and bring out the best. And that was one thing that I hope I learned a little bit about from Mimi. But she certainly had that ability, and she was such a soulful person, it was just wonderful to be anywhere with her. I also saw the mother side of her because our daughters in this little town in Spain spoke reasonably well Spanish, so we're able to hook up with the local younger people that were out there hanging around. And they went out with them every night. And one night they didn't come home until really late. And Mimi and I both were standing out of our little villa waiting for them. And Mimi had this black mantilla. And I don't know if she got it from Sid or where she got it, but it was definitely very fitting to the situation. And when they came home, I was ready to let loose, but Mimi, in her black mantilla, gave the most wonderful little lecture to the daughters that was both on the one hand totally understanding, and on the other hand totally a learning experience for them and for me as well as to why they should not have stayed out that late. So I learned that from Mimi too, although I don't put it into practice as well. Then the other thing, Katie, and maybe you should chime in on this, and I'll be quick, is our book club. Both Katie and I have been in a book club with Mimi for about 25 years, maybe. Yeah. And Mimi was
Pushing 30.
32.
32. Wow. That's amazing. And Mimi
Yeah.
was such a literary person. I mean, she knew all these wonderful books for us to read that were not, new, not the latest out on the press. Like we read something from George Orwell, Down and Out in Paris and London, that I had never heard of, but I loved.
Yeah.
And she introduced us to Ruth Ozeki as an author. I mean, what a wonderful, rich literary experience. She also always wanted us to read the Russians, and we almost always resisted because they're hard. But she did get us to read. Yeah, she did get us to read a couple of short stories.
She did.
So in memory of Mimi, I'm sitting behind one of my bookcases. And again, I just loved her so much. And she was just such a wonderful person to know. I hope that I was able to internalize some of the things about her and take them and make them part of me.
Peter, how about you?
Wow, this
Yeah.
is a
How about your
it's a hard act to follow. I think the only one that I would be harder to speak after would have been Mimi herself. Great story, Mary. I met Mimi on the battlefield, which was maybe where she was all the time. She was always at battle with the powers that be. She wanted a much better world and fought every day to her, literally now, to her last breath. We were in the midst of uprisings around the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in Chicago in April of 1968. The East Chicago Avenue Armory was full of Illinois National Guard armed. And those of us who wanted to see some calm brought to the city decided it would be a good idea to march over to the armory and ask the soldiers to stay out of the neighborhoods and let the people take care of themselves. Mimi was there with her youngest son, Adam, who's in a stroller. The daughter that Mary Driscoll just mentioned, Suzanne, was in Mimi's arms on her hip. And Mark, the oldest one, was kind of holding onto Mimi's skirts. And we were chanting. And all of a sudden, the doors of the armory open, and soldiers with real guns and real bayonets on the end of them come charging out and to break up the crowd. I ended up in jail. Mimi, of course, had her children and was not above using them as human shields, and walked away unscathed. But experiences, I had many other experiences like that with Mimi. And she was such a good friend and had such great insight into you. You know, there's this poetic thing about your eyes being the doorways to your soul or something. Well, somehow Mimi could really get through that, could pierce that. She saw that. She knew me. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that could say this. She knew me better than I knew myself. And even more important, she loved me even more than I could love myself. And
No,
I treasure her.
Mimi was a wonderful person. She, her email was, I think, Equal Justice. She was a fighter.
Pursue justice.
She was a fighter for everybody, and she would let you know if she disagreed. She'd encourage people to support each other in so many ways. I will always be grateful for Mimi, who ran the Three Penny Cinema.
Right.
When she introduced me to the Popcorn Girl, her good friend Stormy Brown, Diane Libman, who became my first wife. And we love Mimi, and her memory moves us forward because we all still have work to do.
Just want to piggyback on you, Michael. That's where I met Mimi, at the Three Penny with Peter and the Popcorn Girl. I met her there too. I saw my first, well, actually the first Martin Scorsese movie there, Who's That Knocking at My Door? That was great that Mimi could bring those kinds of films to Chicago through her, management of the Three Penny.
This is the word I've heard the most used this week. I used it myself at our class, Mary, on the day after she died. Mimi was a giant, and she did not tower over 5'5". I don't think. I don't know her exact height, but for a petite gal, she was a giant, and her effect, you can see it this week in people coming out with their remembrances and mourning her, even at age 90, 91. Was she 91? We had her birthday this summer with the reading group. But anyway, she was still active. She was still vital. She was the greatest, and we loved her. And we hope to honor her memory by being just as vital as she was to the world.
Let's hope we can.
Thank you guys
Indeed.
for coming on and sharing these memories of Mimi. We would keep talking, but as usual, we're running out of time. You can get Live from the Heartland anytime you want at youtube.com/Heartland Media. We want to thank our team, Luis Mejia down in Mexico, Lynn Orman Weiss, our newest fellow, Emilio Davis, and Gwen Brown over there at Loyola.
And let's have these guys join us in our goodbye. Do good in the world.
The world needs all the good that we do. All
right.
People. The struggle continues. Mimi taught us that too.